Alright, I want this video to be a little bit timeless, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but since Lynx is coming back to the game as of like 2 days from now on Friday, then I figured it would be a good as time as any to finally talk about the Storm King and how we beat it and kind of the best way to do it from my perspective. So right off the bat, these are my opinions. This is not the quote-unquote best way to do it. I don't think one exists. I know that it can be soloed. I know that people use Banshee with I believe, a combo of like totally rocking out or riffs. I'm honestly not even certain. It hasn't really interested me too much, but the point is I know that it can be soloed and therefore duoed, and what I'm going to be showing you today is what I believe to be like the most basic / overall effective in a trio. So this standard idea is going to work with 3 people, so all you need is 3 people, and this works great for me because I run Storm Kings for like $5 donations and new members on YouTube right now. These prices may change in the future, but if you ever want to get a mythic weapon, you know, just message me on stream. It doesn't hurt to ask. Please do not spam the comments of this video. This is not a Storm King communal. Don't put it in the comments. If you want to get any help on the Storm King, please join our Discord in the description below. The link will be towards the top of the description. You can find help there. We have a Storm King helpers role. I really want to help people get this done, but don't spam the comments with requests to play. It's just going to become a mess. So after about 200 clears, I have waited about 3 months to make this video because the Storm King came out like, what is it, late February? So I think it was like mid-November, late November, whenever the Mythic Storm King released. I am not the first person to cover this, but I feel like I have a lot of expertise, and we've completed it, as I said, 200 plus times now, and I really feel like we know what we're talking about because the consistency here is really what I'm selling. Now, I know that there are duo techniques. I know that there are ways that you can run, for example, if you use Whiteout Fiona, you can get some sword builds going. You can be pretty effective, and you might only need 2 of you, but ultimately, I think to have 3 people running 1 person with Fight or Flight, which works with 3 different characters I'll mention in a second, and then a couple people with Lynx Cassandra is absolutely my preferred way to take it down in terms of consistency, and this helps me a lot with my teams that I run on stream because I always run Lynx. It's just kind of how I am most effective as a character, and Warcry tends to fall on whoever really wants to cover it. Now, I'm going to be talking about Warcry first, Kunai second, and then what she will be using, and then of course the actual weapons you should be using on the horn. I'll try to link timestamps in the description below. Maybe this will make it a little bit easier to watch, but I don't think this video should be too long. So first off, we have something that actually kind of surprised me. Huge thanks to Benz for sharing his loadout and a ton of his gameplay. I wanted to get a couple of matches where, you know, you get both of our perspective in a game because the Warcry build, you know, as I said, it kind of falls on whoever wants to cover it, but it's an extremely important build. I was shocked to see that we basically had an identical loadout. Now, one thing that I want to mention quickly is that Special Forces Banshee can actually be swapped out with 2 other heroes. So I'm going to go to the Manage tab here and show you that Special Forces is kind of the underlying thing. You've got Special Forces Jonesy and Special Forces Ramirez, who are both like paid heroes, so not everybody might have these. They have the exact same Fight or Flight bonus that Banshee does. You can see that she's completely the same. So I am showing Banshee in this video because I think most people are going to have access to her, but if you have Special Forces Ramirez or you want to use Special Forces Jonesy, that's absolutely going to be fine. Blast from the Past is great for survivability. I seriously prefer it. I know that totally rocking out can work. That's a great choice. I'm not knocking it. In fact, in one of my alternate builds I'll talk about in a second, I actually throw in Subwoofers because that can up your attack speed, and we'll get into that later. But Blast from the Past is awesome just for survivability. You will take a lot of damage out there. I use Saurian Might over Saurian Claws because in terms of my experience, Saurian Claws doesn't actually increase your damage to the horn. That's because the horn is classed as an environmental item, not actually an enemy, so Saurian Claws won't actually help, and that'll come up again later when we talk about some of the weapon choices. Saurian Hide is just great because, again, you want to stay alive, and you'll note that there isn't any survivability in this build. That's because campfires are pretty much crucial and used in almost every single fight. You're going to be on low health all the time. Everything in the Mythic Storm King fight wants to hurt you. You've got meteors, zombies running around attacking you. You got the pitchers throwing shit at you. You've got the gun blazers shooting you. You've got the mist monsters zapping you. The takers. You got the water hurts you. Everything wants you to die in this arena, so I almost gave up trying to heal and figured, you know what? I'm just going to use campfires and Adrenaline Rush. Now, Adrenaline Rush, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead here, is absolutely paramount to save. Do not use Adrenaline Rush all the time. You use it for absolute emergencies. When you are like on the edge of the storm fighting the mini boss and you're the last person alive on your team, that's when you use the Adrenaline Rush to get up like 2 or 3 teammates at once, because that's what it's best for. It's not enough health to be using it randomly, and it's like a 2.5-minute cooldown, so you just cannot be spamming it. It's used for emergencies only. And then the hover turret is something that's basically preference. I like it for just general crowd clearing. I use it all the time. I'm only going to sort of gloss over the airstrike here because it was recommended to me as the quote-unquote new meta for taking down the Storm King. I tried it twice here. I'll try to show you both of those right here. It basically did like 1/8 of the health, and to not use this ability like the entire fight, just saving it for this final moment, didn't really feel worth it to me. Maybe I did it wrong. Maybe if it's more centered, it's better. You can use it if you want. If you think it's useful, that's great. I appreciate that there are options, but I think I'll personally stick with the hover turrets because to just spam a couple hover turrets and then crowd clear a little bit so you're not constantly getting attacked by the beehives and all that crap, I find that to be a little bit more valuable, but I do want to mention the airstrike as an option. And then, of course, hardware crit rating and actuated attacks are because we use the Storm King's Fury. I'll get to that later on, but these basically just buff the hardware. That'll be in the end bit, like I mentioned, with the horn weapons. And then the faster explosions is more or less optional. So when you're working with an optimized team, we're typically using the Storm King's Wrath, and that'll get mentioned a lot more with the Kunai build, but it's basically just a very, very overpowered weapon, and faster explosions might not be necessary, and this is the only perk in this loadout where you have a lot of flexibility. Now you can use the sub wafers again just to up your attack speed on the horn. This is a really great way to buff your horn attack time. You can go for Survivalist Jonesy, which is great for some passive healing. Anybody who's watched me before know I love coconuts, but you can't actually get any in the Storm King fight, so unfortunately we're gonna have to skip out on that one. And then I'm not gonna go through every single hero in the game. Basically anything that you think might be more useful to you over faster explosions is fine, because 17% damage isn't seriously game changing. I mean, it might help the atomizer a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal, especially if you don't have her. This is where there's a little bit of flexibility, but of course I definitely prefer it. So now that we've gone over the loadout and the general tips and tricks for what exactly you want to be using a Warcry hero is extremely important. As I said, you have one main job with kind of a side job. Your main job is to be at the horns the 2 times the king goes down. It is absolutely paramount that you get that Warcry off and buff your other teammates attacking the horn. From my experience, you need about 3 power level 120 plus people to be attacking that horn. Again, I did mention that it can be duoed, so I could be incorrect in this. You might be fine with 2 people with some more specialized loadouts. If you think there's a good way to do it, let me know in the comments below. But again, the way that we've been doing it is as long as 3 of us can get up there. I mean, the ninjas are great because they can double jump up there, but the Warcry hero might be a little bit slower to get on up. And a great tip that I've found when running the Storm King is to not build over each other. When you're getting up to the horn, follow somebody up if they're building ahead of you, because if you try to build as fast as possible, more often than not, you're just going to block off your teammates and you're going to end up losing the fight. So that's your main singular job, is to be at the horn and pop the Warcry on time. And then the other side job is to just stay alive. Leave it to the Kunai, leave it to the Lynx players to take out the crystals, take out the mini boss. You can certainly help, absolutely, but the role of a Warcry, because you have so much less mobility, having, without the double jump, your job is basically run medic and just be available when the Storm King goes down. Now, there are some tricks that a lot of people use while using the edited walls. This might be patched in the future. I don't know if I have any gameplay of it, but you can edit out an arch and then you can build up on top of that. I've seen a lot of people use that. I don't personally prefer it because anything you build up there will just get taken out with the Storm King, turns into a ballerina, and then it just isn't worth it. You can build little huts for healing, but ultimately that's just another option, but it's never been my personal forte. And then an alternate build to Warcry is, of course, using Special Forces Ramirez to demonstrate that it's the exact same team perk. I've seen Happy Holidays used pretty effectively. With Happy Holidays, if I can just check it while I'm looking at it right here, you get a 54-second cooldown on Warcry, and I'm pretty sure that's down from like a minute and a half or something. So if you run Happy Holidays, you can kind of use Warcry on like every single mini boss. Just be aware that you have to have it available for when the Storm King goes down. Any good team should be counting it out. If you've noticed any of my gameplay in the past, I don't know if it's in this video or not, but I count every single crystal that gets broken because he goes down on the 5th one both times. So if you break 10 crystals, he should go down. I've had in very rare circumstances, either it's user error where I miscounted or a glitch or something where isn't 5, but 99% of the time it's 5 crystals and he goes down. So as long as you're aware, if you're not on like the 4th crystal and you're about to break it, you can basically pop Warcry like 2 or 3 times as often with Happy Holidays, and it's kind of a good way to go. And then of course, as I mentioned earlier, I threw in sub wafers here just to show that you have a couple of extra team perks now that you're not using the Dino Heroes. And then I also put in sub wafers to show that you can use Totally Rockin' Out and then swap Survivalist for like somebody to activate it. Fumble might not be great because you'd have to go in the water most of the time. Bringing down the house isn't that great because you shouldn't be attacking anything with heavy attacks, in my opinion. So Battle Beat, if you throw a drone or something, might be a great way to activate this and could help you out a lot. But note that your health and your armor has gone away if you're no longer using Blast from the Past, and you... Oh man, I cannot stress the stay alive part any harder than I can if you're running this loadout, because if you're using this is what I would consider to be more of an advanced loadout. This is the kind of thing you run if you absolutely know what you're doing and you're not going to go down in the middle of the fight, because you could lose the match running around with something like this, but it is an option, a couple of options that you can use instead. So just to sum it up before we move on to Lynx, stay alive, be there at the horns, pop the Warcry on time, that's when you've got at least 3 people in range, and as kind of a last note, I feel like I tried to mention this earlier. I don't know if I ever expanded on my thought, but because Warcry is more or less not the damaging perk, it's really more of the support role. If you ever have 3 high-level players running it with maybe a lower player or something along those lines, having the lowest level player in the group run Warcry might be the most beneficial to the team, seeing as I said, their role is to just pop the Warcry on time. They don't actually ever have to do any damage, so you might want to pawn that role off to the lower level players. However, their lack of survivability being a lower power level could possibly, ruin your run. Now, this is an afterthought that kind of made me happy that I waited to make this video, because somebody on stream sort of reminded me that if you're running multiple Warcries, it could be really, really beneficial to have a second Warcry, maybe pop it later on in the horn breaking process, so that it bleeds over into when you're actually attacking the Storm King in the final stage, because I have lost plenty of fights right when we broke that second horn, and then all of us ended up dying before we could actually kill the Storm King. So, while not necessary, it's a good tip to keep in mind that if you have a second Warcry, you could make that last process quite a bit easier. Alright, now that we've covered Warcry, let's talk about Lynx. I know, I've held her in suspense this whole time. It's the reason that she's coming back early. Everybody wants Lynx for Mythic Storm King. So, massive disclaimer right off the bat, you do not need Lynx to beat the Storm King. You don't. She's very helpful, and you'll see why, but I have found that any high-level player who can hit the crystals and stay alive is going to have next to no issue taking down the Storm King, so long as you're, capable of staying alive and in the action. So, Lynx is great because, for the main reason that she can do double damage from, the click of a button. She has a Kunai ability bonus, if you will. She buffs the Kunai to where she can do 140% extra damage just by going into Kunai, which in the real world works out to basically double damage. Like my Storm King's Wrath in a full party goes from 1.6, 1.7 million to 3.4 million effectively. So it's a huge bonus and is definitely something that you want. And the weapons for her is almost as important as her loadout. Now, her loadout, if you skipped the Warcry, which I would hope you didn't because I went into a lot more detail about the actual fight in that section, this is what I use. Blast of the Past, Saurian Might, Saurian Hide, just because Paleo Luna doesn't actually affect the horn. I mentioned that earlier, how it's an environmental thing and it's not actually taking proper damage. So if I'm not mistaken, melee weapon damage as of when I tested it didn't actually do any extra damage towards the horn, and so Saurian Might just goes into the extra damage that you can do towards the mini boss or miscellaneous whatever. Hardware crit rating and actuated attacks, because I use a Storm King's Fury, and if you use a melee weapon, you might want something that buffs melee damage. Like Whiteout Fiona is huge, very, very helpful, and then you could use something like Assassin Sarah or whatever. I don't know if that's going to actually affect the horn, but you might need to tinker around a little bit, but I do know that hardware crit rating and actuated attacks definitely buffs the Storm King's Fury, and then faster explosions just makes your rockets do more damage. It's just extremely useful to have, especially if you're using like my loadout with the deatomizer to crowd clear and the Storm King's Wrath for actual damage. Faster explosions is definitely nice to have. I also mentioned in the Warcry section that this is kind of an alternate perk. If you really don't think you need that extra damage, Survivalist can be nice because we don't actually have any survivability in this build. I am relying fully on campfires. Adrenaline Rush is saved exclusively for emergencies. I'm not going to get too far into that because we covered that with Warcry. And then from there you can basically choose whatever you might think helps buffs more. Now, what I can recommend is if you're not using the Storm King's Wrath is something along the lines of assault crit damage or assault weapon damage. The bonus will be pretty much the same, and that's because for a lot of my fights, in fact, I've even got a few of them still saved over here, I used double bundle bust, and I got just a little bit of footage for that because I died right away. I was definitely out of practice. I know it's definitely a lot less effective than the Wrath. As you can see, I just got my ass handed to me right away, but double bundle bust was responsible for like the first 100 times that I beat the Storm King. I'm not exaggerating. It was literally like 90 something fights before I got the Wrath, and double bundle bust is a great option. If you don't have the bundle bust, unfortunately your options are quite limited. There are two that I can recommend loosely, and I say that loosely because you can use the old Betsy or the Spyglass. I have these double headshot because I use them against normal zombies, but of course if you want to use it against the Storm King, crit rating, crit damage, and I don't think you can get a second crit damage on here, or yeah, crit rating, double crit damage is perfectly possible. That's not super recommended. It's kind of like only if this is your only option, because you have a base 15% crit chance. So 43% of the time you'll be hitting like a truck, like well over 1 million damage, but it's effectively every other shot. And the other option is the Obliterator, which is the exact same perks. You know, I use fire rate, crit rating, crit damage. I did use this for a little bit, but I think crit rating double crit damage might be a little bit more bang for your buck. Again, you're really rolling the dice if you're using snipers. However, they will be pretty effective. As I was going to say though, the bundle bust definitely with, you know, this exact perks. I'll link the best perks in the description below where I talk more about the bundle bust and the Obliterator and the Spyglass for that matter. But I mean, the bundle bust is definitely something that has a warm place in my heart because I used it for so many fights, and it was great because I was probably one of the last YouTubers to actually get the Wrath because I took like a week vacation right after the Storm King came out even. So I was really late to getting the Wrath, so I was able to really demonstrate just that the bundle bust certainly works. So that's basically your job as a kunai. Now, I mentioned with the Warcry that your job is to stay alive and get to the horns. As a kunai build, or any ninja build, or literally anything that's just moving around the map, leaping all over the place, doing tons of damage, is to, you know, use your kunai as often as possible. Use it for every single crystal that you can. Use it for every single mini-boss. You know, spec your Wrath properly. It's funny, as I kind of glossed over it talking about the bundle bust, but the Wrath is definitely nice to have. I have my triple damage fire rate down here. This is something just I was messing with. I don't really recommend triple damage, personally, because the amount of times that you'd spend taking out a crystal with triple damage, by that point you would have crit with the Storm King's Wrath. And trust me, it is the most wonderful feeling in the world when you hit a crit on the first try, multiple times in a row even. You just instantly break that crystal. In a full party with a decent team, you know, kunai with actuated attacks, double crit damage, physical, because that does more damage than energy towards the crystals. That thing can one-shot the crystals as I'm recording this. And this is after the nerf to the Wrath long ago, so that's definitely my weapon of choice. And of course, this also goes with the Warcry build. A deatomizer is really nice to just crowd clear. I have one on me almost all the time because it's just really nice for killing zombies around me. If you don't think you need the atomizer and you just want to charge up your Storm King's Wrath for crowd clearing, you could absolutely hold a Baron just for the movement speed. I haven't found this to be necessary, although getting up to the horn and just moving around the map easier is going to be much easier with the Baron in your hand. However, you are going to lose out on a weapon to deal damage, and that's more of like a personal touch because I personally like to have the Fury on my hotbar already, just so I don't have to switch to it to get up to the horn. Now, if you're an absolute sweat, as I used to be with my double bundle buzz, you could use the deatomizer and the Storm King's Wrath and then just have the Baron as well. And then when you're running up to the horn, use the Baron for that extra speed and then, you know, switch to your, you know, Storm King's Horn damaging weapon on your way. That's a lot of micromanagement, and I wouldn't recommend that to anybody but like the sweatiest of players. And there's no offense meaning there, by the way. Like I said, I was that guy for a long time. When I used my double bundle bus, I would switch to the ear splitter and my weapon of choice, which was the surround pound at the time. And switching out 2 weapons for every single horn did get us killed on more than one occasion. It wasn't often, but it did happen because even playing at your best, you do mess up, you do miss the switch at some point, and you do not have a lot of seconds to break that horn, and that can lose the fight. So it's just something to consider. An alternate build for Lynx Cassandra other than Blast from the Past is basically what I showed over here. This exact Totally Rockin' Out build, but swap her for Kunai. This could work just fine. Totally Rockin' Out, you'll miss out on a lot of tankiness. You will not be able to take too many shots before you're instantly dead. But if you have the sub wafers from the small amount of metal in the loading zone and the metal area outside, you can get some wafers and that'll up your attack speed. However, in my experience, you do not need this. It can be helpful and it might come in clutch, but you do not need wafers. I definitely prefer Blast from the Past just for survivability. So I think that just about covers everything that I have to say about Lynx. Now I can finally talk about the actual loadout for the horn. So I'm actually going to go quick back into my heroes. I don't think I had her saved anywhere, but if you're going to use a sword for the horn, you definitely want Whiteout Fiona. Upping that crit rating is basically all you sword users have for the horn that I'm aware of. If I'm missing something and there's something hugely helpful that I should be mentioning, let me know in the comments below. I want people to have the best help here, but Whiteout Fiona as the lead can be really nice just for buffing the crit rating for some of your weapons that you can use on the horn. And the only two that I recommend are the Storm King's Ravager and the Spectral Blade in terms of swords. Now, if you're using the Spectral Blade, that damage to the Slow and Snared isn't doing any help to you if you're attacking the horn, so maybe an extra attack speed could be nice, and then switch to this one to crit damage. And then, of course, if you're going to be using this in the Storm King's Horn, you're going to want this to be a physical loadout because it just does more damage than energy towards the horn. So that's definitely something to consider, and something hugely important that I'm going to talk about now that we've just sort of glossed over the swords here. They are an option if you build it right. I think hammers are the way to go, and that's why I recommend the Fury or the Surround Pound. I know that there are a lot more options. Please let me know in the comments below if you want to have a complete list, but these are the two that I've used the entire time. If you don't have the Surround Pound, then I'm not personally an expert on all of the different options that you can use here. Somebody in the comments will be able to fill us in on that, but there are not only these four options that I've mentioned, but they are the ones that have worked the most for me. And the Surround Pound I'm actually using in nature because I've mentioned several times now that the horn is an environmental item. I believe it's seen as like a metal object. You are effectively doing the damage as punching a car, as I understand it. So in my very light testing, when I used it like one time to compare and contrast, the nature element did seem to do a little bit more damage than the physical one that I had been handed. So I highly recommend using nature. However, it doesn't make that big of a difference. How you could use energy or physical, it would be fine. Physical might be the safest, but nature seemed to do more damage for me at the time. But something that was major that I kind of wanted to save until now is the fact that Bright Core is definitely better than Sunbeam. Now, before you start yelling at me in the comments below, as I would have done to anybody who said that a short while ago, I did do the testing, and as it turns out, because it's seen as an environmental item, the extra damage from Sunbeam doesn't actually help. It does no extra damage. You can see in this footage, comparing and contrasting Sunbeam versus Bright Core, they do the exact same damage, and so that means Bright Core is better simply because it'll last longer. You won't have to craft more of these, but it is it's just 10% faster, so it's like a 0.7 difference there. It's like 0.71 to 0.64. It's not significant. But it's 10% more. And in my experience, if you're the first one at the horn and your team takes a little while to get there, I have gotten in as much as 15 hits on the horn. On a normal fight, if everybody's there and on time, you can usually kill the horde in like 9 to 10 hits each, but what that means is with the Bright Core, you'll get a whole extra swing in, and I'm giggling while I say that because, I mean, if you're not fighting the Storm King as much as I am helping people on stream, this is not that big of a deal. You do not need Bright Core for the fight. It's really not that important. If you want to switch off of Bright Core, I'll link my video in the description below. It's very short, 1 minute long, showing you how to switch back to Sunbeam, as I did to switch to Bright Core. And I giggle as well because if you're not fighting the Storm King all the time, you're just trying to get your weapons, Sunbeam is just fine. I cleared the Storm King over 180 times just using Sunbeam, and it's fine. It's really not that big of a deal. And also, Sunbeam is hugely more effective to normal zombies out in the real world, so it's definitely the way I'd prefer to use my Storm King's Fury out and about, but in the more specific, you know, higher end setting, physical / Bright Core is my way to go for the horn. You can see that I have one for each situation. And of course, the Storm King's Fury / Surround Pound is why I was using actuated attacks and the extra hardware bonus. If you are using something else, as I said, you're going to want to switch off. So hopefully that covers everything I had to say about the Storm King fight. That covers the Lynx loadout, the Warcry loadout, and what weapons you should be using on the horn and out and about in the fight. Thank you so much to Benz for recording his footage so that he can get me all that Warcry footage of the exact same fight that I was in. Hopefully this helped you guys. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments below. I want to answer all the questions, but this should have been an educated guide to the Storm King and how to beat it consistently. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you're new, feel free to subscribe, like the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have